So this was the last great iPhone, and you might have missed it. If you didn't pick one up when it did come out, you missed the boat on this one. And which one is this? Well, take a guess. It's the iPhone 13 Pro Max. This has been my favorite iPhone that I purchased in the past 5 years. I bought this way back when it launched in 2021, and I think this was peak iPhone. Super refined right here. There was almost nothing wrong with this device. It stood out instantly because it had the same build as the 12 Pro Max, but it had way longer battery life. 12 Pro Max was like introducing a new design, which was nice, but it came out during the pandemic. People were not really focused on iPhones at the time, and Apple didn't put out the best version ever of the iPhone because that one had weaker battery life. And while it was thinner, it just wasn't as good as the 13 Pro Max. Let's just put it that way. And then also the design just felt perfect at the time. You know, the phone was weighty, so it gave it a premium feel. It had a chunky battery, which gave it some nice length and longevity. And to this day, this phone still is a beast in battery. Yes, it had the notch, but MacBooks have the notch, so it kind of like blended in. Other phones were doing a little bit better with that area, but Face ID was there. We were used to Face ID. Big, large 6.7-inch display, so plenty of size without being too big. And it did have my favorite thing here, the SIM card tray. And while I know the greasy edges look gross here on camera, the phone itself feels incredible. Like, it feels super high-end. I actually think the stainless steel does a better job with heat management, so we didn't have any issues with that. The actual phone itself feels like nicer to hold, mostly because even though it has like a sharper edge, it feels to me like a more fancy product. Does that make sense? A little bit more luxurious, but it doesn't feel nicer to feel the edges. I will say the newer phones got better at that. And I got the graphite color. My favorite color I actually reviewed a while ago. I don't have it anymore, but the Alpine Green was my favorite color that launched, I believe, in the spring. So they launched a second color, but I always wanted to see like a crimson or like a deep red color of this, similar to what we've seen on some other Chinese phones, like the OnePlus Open Apex edition. If you've seen that red, this will look amazing in that red. The next one is battery life that you can trust. I always got really good battery life, and I talked about this a little bit earlier on my iPhone 13 Pro Max, and it's one of the reasons that made this phone such a great option for me. Ever since then, we went to the 14 Pro Max here. That actually had worse battery life in my experience in this. The 15 Pro Max came close to this, but the 16 Pro Max now is kind of unwieldy large. Like, it's huge. It's a little bit harder to hold and operate day to day because it's a 6.9, but it finally has similar battery life to what the 13 Pro Max had. So you didn't have to wait. You already had that several years ago. The camera on this phone also wasn't overhyped. It was just really good. So what I mean by this is that I don't care what lens you're on. This one didn't have like overly over the top 48 megapixels. You didn't have to know the apertures to get a little bit blur. This was the perfect consumer camera. Everything worked good. The video quality, the photo, there was no weird stuff with background blur. Macro was on point. This was the absolute best consumer grade iPhone camera I feel like they ever made when it came out. And nowadays they do have really good cameras still, don't get it twisted, but at the same time they kind of like sometimes they can like blur the background a little bit and kind of mess up the photo, but this one was kind of more fixed. It was just a very easy to use camera setup, and it had plenty of zoom. It was never like really far behind in zoom. It didn't have super long zoom, but it wasn't like 15x was still acceptable, so I wasn't like thirsting for a lot of zoom at that point. The next one is that iOS, while now it is a little bit more complex than it used to be, it was less buggy than it is now. So iOS was very clean and fast on the iPhone 13 Pro Max when this first came out, and that makes it a really different experience now. These newer iPhones are a little bit buggier, I feel like. I don't know why, but they just run a little bit different. Like, to me, they have a few more bugs that are being introduced per update than they used to, and they kind of have these weird issues where the camera will go black. So it's just a buggier experience than it was when this came out. Apple got this very, very right. They did everything that we wanted on a phone. Very bright screen. ProMotion was also key here because that was the first year they brought it, was to the 13 Pro and Pro Max. And ever since then, this phone, I knew when it came out, was going to feel amazing years down the line. And here we are, years down the line, and I could scroll this phone and feel like I'm still scrolling through a beautifully smooth premium experience. So I really do like that this phone held up so long. If you have a 13 Pro Max now, I'm sure you're still very happy with the device. Let me know your experience if you've had it for quite some time right now. But this one really just, they nailed it with the ProMotion at the time. Now it's such a standard feature on most phones that we tend to be annoyed that phones like the 16 Plus, the 16, the 14 Plus, the 15 Plus never got that, because they had it all the way back on the iPhone 13 Pro Max, and Android competition has had this forever. Apple just got a lot of things right with this phone. And later, I feel like they kind of lost the magic because we started seeing a repeat. Like, this is like copy and paste right here to the iPhone 14 Pro Max, while also introducing a few issues. And yes, the 48 megapixel was a big upgrade, but the overall package just felt to me like the 14 Pro Max was just a copy and paste job with a few couple upgrades from the 13 Pro Max. The 15 Pro Max was sleek, and the 16 Pro Max is really great on battery and Apple Intelligence and stuff like that, but I've had more bugs on that phone than I ever experienced on the 13 Pro Max. So you might be thinking, Nick, bro, you're just having nostalgia. You're just thinking back. You're just missing the old days. No, I just think since the iPhone 13 Pro Max came out, I haven't felt as excited about the latest iPhone since here. Yeah, I did cover it, and I have enjoyed my 16 Pro Max. Don't get it wrong. I was very excited initially about the bezels, but I feel like we're at the point now where we need another big upgrade, like an exciting one, like the 13 Pro and Pro Max series was. So I'm excited to see what happens with the 17s, where Apple's going to go with reductions in the dynamic island, and also where they're going to go with this all-screen future, and maybe even the iPhone foldable future. So it's starting to get exciting again. But this was the last great iPhone where almost there was no issue to complain about. And will it still hold up today? And the answer is absolutely. This phone has plenty of power to run ChatGPT, Perplexity, Grok, all the AI chatbots, Gemini even, and it still has a ProMotion display, so running through it is smooth. Yes, you do get a little bit of an issue here and there with a couple of RAM things, like 6 gigabytes of RAM. You might have an app close once in a blue, but most of the time you could do everything. You could video edit on here. You can do all the high-end stuff. You still have a high-end camera. This phone has held up aged like a fine wine. So that's what I want to discuss today about the 13 Pro Max. It was the last great iPhone, I believe. What do you guys think down below? Do you think this was the last great one, or you're totally over that? You're like, bro, who cares about that old phone? We're on to something new. Let me know your thoughts down below and which iPhone you're currently using. And thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next more Nick Ackerman video where we cover topics we don't usually discuss on the main channel, where we do comparisons, speed tests, and the like. I'll catch you on the next one. Nick here. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to be well, and peace.